Okay, so first of all, I will explain the REST API which is developed in Spring Boot using a IntelliJ IDEA. Okay, so let me close all the tabs first. So first of all, there are four packages named with controller, entities, repositories, and services. So before starting the project, we first need to create a entities classes because entities will hold the data and store in the database. Also, they will be a mediator, and you can say that it's an object that contain a single row of the data in the database. Okay, so first of all, this is a trip entity, and the first annotation will be tell the JPA Springboard that this class will be treated as entity. And at table annotation will tell the JPA that create a table with name trips, and these are the two methods, getter and setter, which is basically getting the value of this class members and setting the values. So first is a string. UUID is universal unique ID, which represent a unique ID for the each trip data row. Second is a location for which location this trip is created. The third one is a date of the trip. When will when what is the date of this trip, and when will be the this trip goes. Okay, and this is a JSON format because all the data handling between client and this REST API in the format of JSON. So we also need to mention the JSON format, date format, because this format must be followed in the JSON uh, response or a request. And private string weather, which contain complete information related to the weather of this location. Okay, and this is a one-to-many relationship of interest against the trip. So for the interest, let's suppose that you have one trip, and one trip have can have multiple interest by multiple user. Let's suppose if I am a user and you are also user, I created a trip and you also show the interest in my trip. Another one also show the interest in my trip. So I created a trip, and my trip has two interests with your and one another. The third one is a string UUID, which represent that this person created a trip. And this is an empty constructor, this is a parameterized constructor, and these are all the method of getting and setting the values of the members, these variables. Okay, so this is an interest class, trip interest class. It contain a ID which is auto generated strategy, that it's if you are familiar with the MySQL sequence, which is automatically calculate the next number and assign as a primary number or primary key for the row. So it will be implemented in this annotation. It's implemented in this annotation, long id. And here is again the reverse relationship, many to one. The many interests are related to the single trip. The previous example that I told you, that I created a trip, and you and one another also shown the interest in my trip. So my trip has two interests. So if these example has two view. One view is for with respect to the trip class, that trip has many interest. And other view is that the interest has one in a trip. Let's suppose you can say that multiple in our example we have two interests, you and another person. So two interests related to the single trip. Okay, and this is a user id. This will be the user id that which user show the interest in this trip. Okay, and this is a user class. All the headers are same as I explained for the trip class. Okay, and this is a ID generator, and in this class I am using the ID generator of unique universal ID generator type. Okay, it's a hibernation, and first name, last name, date pattern, gender, and preferred language, phone, address, email, password, emergency contact in case of any problem, or uh, in case of any type of emergency you can contact this person on this emergency contact number. And it is also has a one to many relationship, that because as in the previous example, because every interest is related to the user, so users also have a variable. If the user want to check or retrieve the list of interest that in which he is show the interest, then it will retrieve by this method, this variable. Okay, after that entry we created, the second step is to create a repository. Repository are the classes which deal with the manipulation of data in the database. Okay, first I will show you a repository, trip repository. I created an interface with the trip repository, extend with jpa repository. So JPA repository is a built-in predefined coded. We need to just only pass a trip class and the trip class primary key variable type, and this is a customized query for just only find the trip by UID. Name, find the trip by UID. Name is equal to UUID. Value will contain the query, and I will annotate this method with add query. The first question mark 1 represent the first parameter, question mark 2 will represent the second parameter if it exists here. Okay, and this is a user repository. User repository has two methods. For one is for authenticate login purpose, and the second one is to find the user with email address, or you can email address or ID. The third is a repository interest class. There's nothing customized methods like a customized method. We just annotate the interface with the repository. Remember, the annotations are very important in this REST API because it's a Spring Boot framework. We annotate each steps one by one. If anything require annotation or components adjustment or beans compiling while a runtime or dynamic, we just need to use annotations. And in this case I'm using a add the repository annotation. Public interface trip insert in interest repository extend to JPA repository. The first parameter will be the class entry class, and the second will be the primary key of that class. After the repository we created a trip service. We need to create a services which will be called from controller classes. So first of all I created the trip service. The trip service contain the 1 2 3 4 and 5 methods. I create a variable trip repository and annotate with auto void, so it will automatically created in the background, automatically initialize this variable. And this method find trip will take a parameter id, and the repository class which we extend with jpa repository have a method find by name predefined. We don't need to concern with the code, just use the method dot find by id and pass the parameter id, or else throw. If it is not found any object or any trip against this id, it will show the it will return the throw exception, that entity not found. And the second method will give a complete list of all trip. The third one, save the trip, will taking a parameter of trip and simple. You can call trip repository dot save method and pass the parameter, and it will save the parameter. And update will be update the trip will take a trip parameter, and first of all it find the trip, it find the trip with the trip dot uid. I will get the uid from this parameter, which is passed by client, which is sent by client id, or otherwise it show the exception that the entry not found. Delete trip will represent that the trip dot first of all it will find the trip with id, and after that it delete the id. Okay. Okay, here we need to. Okay, you can also update this line on your side. So this is a trip service, and second one is a user service which contain only two methods, which the authenticate user method and register user for a sign up. It's for sign up. If your client application click on sign up button, it take a information and save the user. So on onward the user will log in with his credentials, and this authenticate user method will take us email and a password, and it's throwing an entity not found exception, and it authenticate the user which is defined in this user repository method. Look, this method I am calling this method, passing email and a password, and this query will be called and return the results as an optional parameter if it found. Okay, and this will save a simple, it's a very simple method. It's just only saving the user in the database. Okay, so now the basic building blocks are ready. Now the major class which interact with direct API and listening on URL is the API controller. I annotate with request mapping and pass a path API v1. If you want to change, you can change here, and when you change this you need to just enter the URL properly containing this path, then it will listen for the request and results. In this class I also noted with the rest controller that this class represent as a rest controller. Okay, and created a two services name with trip services and user services. Auto void will created automatically initialization at a runtime when it is called or used, as I explained before. This is a get mapping is a get method, and slash ping, it's just for checking that the server is up or not. The second method is a get mapping, get all the trips. It will return the list of trip that has stored in our database. It's just only service dot find all trip method, which indirectly call the repository trip repository dot find all the method. Okay, this is a post method to save a new trip in the database. It is taking a two parameter. First is a request body requiring a body in the string data type, and the second one is a URL parameter. URL parameter is for user ID, that this trip is created against this user. So first in this method I am using a use JSON mapper class, which convert the string response request body string a method into the trip object. Then I call trip service dot save trip and pass the parameter which converted by the JSON mapper. So it saved the method, is it saved the entity and also returned the fresh saved entity result. Okay, the second is update the trip. So update trip 70% same like add a trip. In add trip it is it contain a URL parameter, but there is no URL parameter. It's just only taking a request body of trip type, and we call the trip service dot update trip and pass the parameter trip. The second is if public find the trip by ID, taking a URL parameter as name with the trip ID is equal to this value. What will be the ID, and find the trip and send back to the client application. Remove will take a parameter of trip ID and find the trip in the database. If it found, then it will call that trip services dot delete or remove the trip and pass the user ID, which is indirectly called the JPA or trip repository to remove the data from database. Actually, this is a layered structure. Everything is layered. So let's suppose you can say that this is a first layer API, the second layer is services, the third layer is repository, and the fourth layer is entities. Okay. And this is login user method which take a email and password. Both of these parameter will pass in a URL. So there is no requiring a body. And just it's calling the authenticate user method will return the complete user object which is retrieved from the database, which contain all the complete information of a user, including date of birth, address, phone number, etc. Post mapping is for sign up. It is requiring a body. So and body cannot be empty. I am also mentioning required is equal to true, which tells the Spring Boot framework that the body must be there, otherwise there will be error. Now these two methods is related to the API that we integrated. The first method will be taking information about the weather. It's take up two parameter. First one is a weather date, for which date you are querying the weather condition, and the second one is a queue name with queue, which contain the location of the where you for which location you are getting the weather information. So in this project, I am using a UniRest Maven dependency for project management and dependency management and library management. So first of all, this is a predefined URL, and I also pass a URL parameter key is equal to this one. I take this key from my account when I created account on worldweather.com and requested for the API key. Then they assign me this key. It is valid for only 1 month. If you want to use this for long term, you have to pay them, and it will extend it. And second one is a format. In which format I need a data. I mentioned that I need a data in JSON format. Number of days I is equal to, I just only need information of weather for only 1 day. And second is a date and a query. And these two parameters are passed in this string, which and then this method will encode everything in the string format, and the response will be saved in a string. And after a string response, and after that return statement will return the response dot get body, which contain a string results on the client's end. Then we decode this string result into a JSON object, which is a weather info object. Okay. This method is generating a random UUID, which is used for assigning to the trip ID. Okay, this is this in this I am also using UniRest, and here is a method is a post. In above we I am using a get method. In this I am using a post method. The same, this is a URL defined in on the website of random.org, and the header will be tell that the application want a response in JSON format, and this is a JSON body, the JSON prog. This is a complete template, and it is mentioned in their site. You can visit and review it. It just only take a 5 to 10 minutes to understand. Okay, when I call this, the response will save in this object. I check in the response status. If the response status is equal to 200, then it's mean that the request is successfully executed and returned the something. And question mark, here I'm using a ternary operator, Java ternary operator, and return if the true, if the result response is equal to 200, then it will return the JSON body response dot get body, which will be the which will decode it in our client application in random object response object. Otherwise it will return an empty object. Okay, so this is a complete overview of the application. It has only things of 3 and 3 6 6 to 8 and 9. These 9 classes is a complete your REST API. Okay, and this is a property class. Property class contain the information about your application, on which port you want to run Tomcat. This is a Hibernate DL auto update, and this is a database URL. You can mention the URL, and this is a database name slash database name. And this is a username of your MySQL server password, and this is a driver class, and we are using show SQL is equal to true will show the SQL in the CMD, and where the program is running for checking that the queue what will be the query is created while executing the request. Okay, thank you. In the next video I will explain the client application.